Ladies and gentlemen, there's great news if you're in the market for a new GPU. There have been some significant price movements in the good direction, that's going down, over the past few months, but in particular over the last week or two, we're really starting to see select cards become much better in terms of value. Key cards such as the 7900 XT and XTX from Nvidia, as well as various RTX 40 and 30 cards, have seen significant reductions in price. In this video, as you probably guessed, I want to talk to you a little bit about these price cuts and which regions we're seeing them in, along of course with the various cards that have been impacted, and also talk about some simulated benchmarks for AMD's upcoming 7800 series of graphics cards, also known as Navi 32. But let's start things out, I suppose, with perhaps one of the new cards on the market, and that is the RTX 4060 Ti. This card launched about a month ago, and at the MSRP it was $400 US. You guys know the story, of course there's more expensive models, but the base price was $400. Now the card was received with a fairly lukewarm reception. 8GB of RAM wasn't ideal, and ultimately I think the lack of bandwidth was the thing that also hamstrung the card. There were two issues. A 16GB variant of course is coming later, and later this month as well we're looking at the 4060 non-Ti that is going to launch at a grand total of $299. However, videocards.com have spotted a 4060 Ti Ventus, which is available for $20 US cheaper than the MSRP, and this is not just from one retailer in the US either. We're seeing this from Newegg, Amazon, as well as B&H Photo. But we are not just talking about one card here, because one card does not a trend make. Instead, we are seeing this across a wide, just absolutely massive number of GPUs. 3dcenter.org, which is a German German website, excuse me, but you can quite easily see the list, and of course Google Translate is pretty effective as well. And we can see a number of SKUs, both from US as well as German retailer, with the US prices being from Newegg. So let's pick on a couple of cards, shall we? Let's take the 7900 XT and take it out back for a spanking, because we are looking at a 13% difference in MSRP here versus what it's actually going for retailer, and much the same thing could be said in Germany. In fact, the difference is even more. The 4090 is seeing a smaller cut, well, small in relative terms anyway. The 4080, that's actually pretty big. And cards like the 4070, well, depends on the region, basically. Now, ultimately, this means that in Germany, we are looking at around a 4% difference versus MSRP, and in the United States, we're looking at around a 10% difference. So again, of course, it's going to be retailer dependent. It will, of course, also depend heavily upon the card, but this is a trend which really does seem to be just pretty consistent. There are yet more results of this, for example, in the Netherlands. This is courtesy of hardware.info. Again, I'll leave a link to this in the video description, and I won't read out all of the SKUs here because I think I will be here until, well, basically the next 500 years, but there are a couple of select cards which really do pique the interest. For example, the 3060 is $349 US. Back at the MSRP price. However, now it's basically $300 US. So essentially we're looking at a 10% difference from May, and of course around a 13% from the MSRP. The 4070 again has seen a small price cut. Obviously the newer cards for the 40 series have seen a smaller price cut. Newer cards are much greater one. With AMD, the price differences are quite stark actually. The 7600, which of course is the newer card from AMD, that's basically still essentially MSRP, so it's not really worth talking about. But other key cards, for example, the 6800 non-XT, the difference from MSRP is now about 22%, and the 6900 and 6950 XT are even more substantial, up to 40%. Now, I still don't necessarily know if some of these cards would be ideal scenarios. For example, at the kind of price that we're looking at, let's say with the 3060 vanilla, not the Ti, I would actually be more inclined, because of the price cuts with what's going on at the moment with Intel's Arc. I would at least encourage you guys to check them out. The A750 as well as the 770 are having some really hefty price cuts. Again, of course, this is somewhat region dependent, but they are honestly quite tempting GPUs. The ultimate reason, of course, all of this is occurring is that the cards are just not selling in the volume that, well, we expect. I've heard, honestly, through numerous people that the 7600 just sold like crap, and the 4060 Ti isn't doing much better. It's like, I don't know, it's not quite crap, but it's not exactly, you know, sunshine and lollipops either. So, ultimately, I think that we're seeing numerous reasons that this is occurring. The used market obviously is doing quite well at the moment. I think that we're also at about the halfway point for the next generation cards to emerge. Obviously RTX 50 is probably going to launch, you know, in the next 12 to maybe 13, 14, 15, 16 months or whatever it is. So a lot of folks are just waiting. And combine that with the fact that the cost of living is a lot more expensive at the moment. And sure, if you own, let's hypothetically say, a 2080 Ti or a 6800 XT, it's not the fastest card on the planet anymore, but it's not like it's crap. It's not like this card is going to suddenly do poorly, and with technology like DLSS and FSR2 and so on, you can argue that they're doing pretty well. I think that it's going to be a very interesting thing to see how the next generation cards sell, honestly. And obviously you have folks who are looking at, let's say, buying the 4090, and they've got the cash, and I think that's one of the reasons that the 4090 is selling so well. But let's shift our focus a little bit to some interesting results over at Igor's lab. Now, basically what they have done is essentially simulate a 7800 XT. Now, of course, I want to stress that is a simulation. That is not the same thing as a full card. So what basically Igor over at Igor's lab has done is essentially utilize a pro card and overclocked it. So they basically cranked the clock frequency up, they adjusted the memory speed, and they also limited the VRAM to just half of what it would normally be. So what this basically means is you have a reasonably good, wow, I cannot speak today, a reasonably good facsimile of what the results will be. And you can see it on screen yourself through numerous results from Igor. I would, of course, encourage you to check out the full article, which, of course, I will leave in the video description. Now, it goes without saying that at, let's say, 1080p, there is no substantial difference. We're looking at CPU bound here. But at higher resolutions, such as 1440p and, of course, 4K, we start to see a meaningful increase between, let's say, the previous generation, like the 6800 and the 7800 XT simulated. So for example, if we look at the 6800, which is essentially the 100% mark on the graph, we're looking at a 12% increase. If we go down, however, to the 1440p results, again, we're more CPU bound and other things start to come into play, and instead it's around 8%. These results are also pretty close to benchmarks that I've already leaked on the channel. I was told that with TimeSpy, a prototype N32 board is scoring around 19,000. So again, that is 3D Mark TimeSpy. Again, I was told that it's scoring about 19,000 points. I'm not going to give the exact score because it would make things too easy to pinpoint, so I'm not going to tell you it to the actual 100% number, but basically you can essentially say 19,000 points. And if you look at the percentage of difference here versus what, let's say, a 6800 XT scores in TimeSpy, then yeah, it does pretty much match up. It's going to be very interesting to see what AMD's strategy is with the N32 based cards. Obviously they will be coming quite a bit later. I've heard around Q3, but honestly that seems to be a shifting date at this point. I think they're going to basically be very similar in performance to the equivalent Nvidia GPUs, but probably less energy efficient, and it's going to be the same old story again as what we've already seen. It's going to be very curious though to see what happens with AMD going forward, especially with technology like FSR3. Also, this is a little off topic, but I really wanted to talk about this just real quick because I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one. I actually posted about this on Twitter, and it's got nothing to do with the release of hardware, but instead software. Specifically, we're talking about Silent Hill 2 here. The official Steam specs have popped up for Silent Hill 2 on PC, and I'm not going to read out all of them because, well, a lot of them are just superfluous, but you'll notice that the minimum requirements, we're looking at a Ryzen 3 3300, which is essentially a turnip at this point, 12 gigs of RAM, but notice the GPU. Let's just call it the 1080. Let's just make things simple here. I'm not going to talk about the 5700, but look at what this actually gives you. This is the minimum requirements, which should be low medium at full HD. So that's nice, you know. I guess at least we're playing at 1080p and not something like 640p or 720. And that's a quote stable 30 FPS, which is nice, I guess. On the other hand, an 8700K or a 3600X and 16 gigabytes of those accompanying memories, if you put that together with an 2080 RTX, so that was a typo, or a 6800 XT, well, things get spicy here, don't they? Yep, they do. This is a spicy chili. Additional notes. Playing on recommended requirements, Jesus, I cannot speak today, should enable play on medium quality at 60 FPS or high quality at 30 or full HD or 4K using DLSS or similar technology. So it seems that we have confirmation that there's DLSS, which is nice. Hopefully it also supports XCSS as well as FSR, because honestly it would be nice if it supports multiple technologies. But Jesus, like 1080p 30 FPS? Dude, that's a 6800 XT. I really want to know what the scaling's like. So I guess the question is, like, what is this actually going to be? Like, what is it, an optimization issue? Is it just that this game is going to, like, be very demanding? I will be very curious to see what the PlayStation 5, for example, visual settings are like in terms of a PC. Is it, for example, medium? Are we looking at low to medium on the PS5? Is there simply optimization? For example, is the 6800 XT required because it's got that extra RAM, or the 2080, it's got that extra little bit of RAM? Like, what's going on? It's going to be very interesting to see how this game plays out. And I've said exactly the same thing on Starfield at the moment. It is going to be very interesting to see how these games play and scale. It seems anyway with Silent Hill 2, assuming they don't change the system requirements, and of course they can prior to launch, it seems with Silent Hill 2 anyway, the game is not super CPU demanding. I mean, I guess the 3600X, it's not like it's, you know, slow. It's not, you know, like a 2500K or something like that. But it's certainly not one of the latest generation processors or anything like that. So I'd say that the CPU side of things is actually pretty reasonable across the board. But damn, 1080p 60 FPS for medium. That's interesting with a 6800 XT. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on that, guys. With that said, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.